Okay, so get this.
13-year-old girl
Nirmala Pant.
goes missing in Nepal.
Her body's found the next day.
This is 2018, right?
Right.
Public outcry is huge.
Huge.
Multiple investigations.
Arrests are even made.
And yeah,
The case remains unsolved.
still unsolved.
Even
It's
today,
incredible.
we're talking about the murder of Nirmala Pant.
A case that really shook Nepal.
It really did.
And today, well, we're diving deep into it.
Yeah, and what's fascinating about this case, and honestly heartbreaking too, is that it becomes this lens.
Through which we see
The cracks in the system,
hold on.
police competence, protection of women, the very idea of justice.
It all gets thrown into question.
Yeah, no, and that's where Umesh Shrestha comes in.
A prominent journalist in Nepal who goes by Salokya. He wrote this incredible 30-part series.
Called #Who Killed Nirmala.
And let me tell you, it is gripping.
It is. It's a real page-turner.
We're talking twists, turns, conflicting evidence.
It's a real-life detective story.
Absolutely, and he doesn't just skim the surface.
Shrestha digs deep.
Into the context, the rumors, the conflicting stories.
Give me this really, I don't know, intimate look at how the investigation unfolded.
Or in some cases,
Didn't unfold at all.
At all.
So to really get into this thing,
we have to start with what we know.
on July 26, 2018.
Nirmala leaves her home to study at a friend's house,
Okay.
just a short bike ride away.
And that's the last anyone sees her alive.
And that journey, short as it was, that becomes a focal point.
Of the investigation.
Of course.
Who could she have encountered on that route?
Right.
Was this a crime of opportunity?
Or was it something, more planned?
Right. And Shrestha, he really lays out the geography for you.
Nirmala's house, the friend's house.
The guava orchard where her body was tragically discovered.
Right.
He even points out these two houses she would have passed.
One of which housed two sisters, Babita and Roshani Bim.
This becomes important later.
Now, you remember that photo of Nirmala?
The one where she's wearing that bright pink frock?
Bam.
That photo is haunting.
Flashing a peace sign.
It's like a gut punch,
Seeing her so full of life, knowing what's coming.
Exactly.
It became a symbol plastered everywhere during protests.
Shared countless times online.
Right.
Symbol of innocence lost.
Yeah.
And this desperate plea for justice.
And Shrestha reveals that it wasn't even taken on the day she disappeared, but weeks earlier at her school's annual program.
Wow.
It just makes the whole thing that much more tragic,
It's
An ordinary day, an ordinary photo.
becoming so tragically significant.
But getting back to those early days of the investigation.
They were chaotic, to say the least.
They were.
Shrestha does not hold back on the details.
No, he doesn't.
The crime scene, as Salokya points out in Part 3, was incredibly mishandled.
Evidence was potentially compromised.
And to make matters worse,
There were conflicting witness accounts.
popping up left and right.
Okay, so right off the bat, we've got a potential mess on our hands.
Yeah,
But then,
it gets even more complicated
oh yeah,
because rumors start circulating.
about a VIP connection.
Right.
Suggesting that someone powerful.
Might be involved.
And they're trying to cover their tracks.
Trying to make things disappear.
It's like, come on.
Shrestha tackles these rumors head on.
He even talks about how in a place where everyone seems to know everyone,
Right.
these whispers can be incredibly damaging.
Of course.
They muddy the water.
Making it almost impossible to separate fact from fiction.
It's like trying to solve a jigsaw puzzle when someone keeps swapping out the pieces.
Exactly.
You can see why people would be suspicious.
And that distrust
In the official narrative,
only grows because of the inconsistencies.
and the lack of transparency from the authorities.
It begs the question, was it just pure incompetence?
Or was there a deliberate attempt to cover up the truth? And that's where those two sisters,
Babita and Roshani Bam,
yeah,
the ones Shrestha pointed out,
early on,
their house,
was
remember,
on the route.
Nirmala took that day.
So they became suspects.
Very much so.
And you start to see how
With the mishandled crime scene,
the rumors
the pressure to find answers,
quickly,
those early suspicions,
even if based on circumstantial evidence.
can really snowball.
Okay, so walk us through this.
What was the evidence against them?
And what did Shrestha uncover?
Well, there were whispers,
Innuendos.
things people claimed to have seen.
Or heard the police question them.
Extensively.
Even arrested them
Really?
at one point.
Wow.
But Shrestha, in part 7...
Does something really interesting.
Okay.
He tracks down their father.
Wait, their father?
Where was he during all of this?
He was living
In another district
completely unaware
of what had happened.
until he got word
Oh, wow.
about his daughters. And Shrestha plays a recording
Of a phone call.
between the father and Babita.
It's chilling, honestly.
Chilling, how she say,
She's distraught
completely falling apart.
as she describes the police raiding their home.
The accusations.
The fear.
Man.
It humanizes them.
These women caught in this whirlwind.
Of suspicion.
Their lives turned upside down.
Right?
And did Shrestha find anything?
To corroborate their story.
That's the thing.
The evidence against them.
Was shaky, at best.
Ultimately, they were released.
But not before their names were dragged through the mud.
Wow.
It really highlights the danger.
Of jumping to conclusions.
Especially in a case as high profile.
As this.
Absolutely. And it makes you wonder,
With all the focus on the band sisters,
were other leads being ignored?
it's a valid question.
And it speaks to a larger issue
Fresh the highlights.
throughout the series.
Yeah.
This idea of tunnel vision
The police, under immense pressure to solve the case.
might have fixated on a narrative, even if the evidence was flimsy.
Which brings us to the whole DNA evidence debacle.
I mean, you'd think that would be the one thing.
To cut through the noise, right?
You'd hope so.
Wouldn't you?
But this is where things get...
Really murky.
Okay.
In part 14.
Shrestha goes deep into the DNA analysis.
And remember, this is a few years after the murder.
Right.
So there's this initial hope that maybe, finally.
There will be some concrete answers.
And I remember how there were those rumors
Swirling around.
about a possible gang rape?
Right.
Well, the initial DNA report
Contradict that.
suggesting a single perpetrator.
Hold on.
So they were pushing a narrative.
That wasn't even supported by the evidence.
They had.
It certainly raises questions, right?
Was it intentional misdirection?
Right.
A desperate attempt to control the narrative?
Or just plain incompetence.
Shrestha lays out the facts.
And lets you draw your own conclusions.
Okay, so that's messed up.
In multiple levels.
But did they ever find a match?
To the DNA they did have.
This is where the whole integrity
What the investigation comes into question.
Okay.
See, Shrestha uncovers concerns.
About the police lab itself?
He quotes experts who question their standards.
What's
Suggesting that the samples might have been mishandled.
potentially even contaminated?
Yay, seriously.
They might have messed up the DNA evidence.
That's like something out of a bad TV show.
I know. But sadly.
It's not that far-fetched.
Oh, man.
And to make matters worse,
There were conflicting reports.
about the DNA analysis circulating.
Conflicting how...
Give me some details here.
So in part 19,
Shrestha talks about how different reports...
it's given at different times.
And it's not clear if these discrepancies were due to new analysis.
Errors in the initial reports.
Or something more nefarious.
Right.
It just adds another layer.
Of confusion.
And fuels that distrust in the authorities.
You've got potentially compromised evidence.
Whispers of cover-up.
Conflicting information.
It's no wonder this case is still unsolved.
And you have to remember,
All of this is happening.
under the intense scrutiny
Of the public.
and the media,
Right.
Shrestha does a brilliant job
Of showing how social media...
while giving a voice
to the voiceless...
and putting pressure on the authorities.
also became this breeding ground.
For speculation.
Misinformation.
Right.
And even harassment.
It's like everybody becomes an armchair detective.
But not always with the best intentions.
Exactly.
And that mob mentality.
Can be dangerous.
Especially when you have real people's lives at stake.
So we've got a tangled web of potential suspects.
Watched investigations.
Yeah. And a public desperate for answers.
What happens next? So we've got this pressure cooker.
Of public scrutiny, right?
Yeah.
Conflicting information.
And a justice system.
That, at least in this case,
seems to be failing.
yeah,
How does that impact?
the search for the truth.
It creates what Shrestha calls this...
Spiral of silence.
Oh,
Just imagine
you're living in this community.
you might have some information.
Right.
Maybe even just a hunch about someone.
But you've seen how this investigation has been handled?
The rumors, the accusations.
Potential cover-ups.
You'd be terrified to speak up.
Exactly.
And that's the insidious thing about this too.
It wasn't just about finding Normala's killer.
It was about a system
Right.
that seemed to protect the powerful.
And silence the vulnerable.
Shrestha talks about this term,
Ginlagdo Rajniti.
which I don't think everyone listening will know.
Right.
What does that mean?
It translates to...
Disgusting politics.
Okay.
And sadly, it's a reality in a lot of places.
Not just Nepal.
Right.
In part 28.
Shrestha exposes how Normala's case
This horrific tragedy
became entangled.
with political maneuvering.
So are you saying
They were trying to use this...
there were allegations
of bribes being offered.
wow, to protest leaders?
Wait, so they were trying to buy their silence?
It's a very real possibility
And it speaks to a deeper corruption.
that Shrestha hints at throughout the series.
Wow.
This idea that justice isn't blind,
It can be bought, manipulated,
and those with power,
can exploit tragedies like this for their own gain.
that's just sickening.
So knowing all of this,
Knowing how badly the investigation was botched,
the rumors,
the political games,
what does Shrestha conclude?
did he find the answer?
To the question, #who killed Nirmala.
That's the thing, and this is where Shrestha's series
As meticulously researched as it is,
leaves you with more questions than answers.
really,
He presents you with this, I don't know, incredibly thorough investigation.
but there's no smoking gun.
No neat conclusion.
So no arrests.
No definitive answers.
Right. We're left with this unsettling ambiguity.
Right.
What about that man arrested in Kathmandu?
Who seem to have, insider knowledge of the crime.
Right.
What about the 2 army personnel?
Who came under suspicion?
Was there a cover-up?
And if so,
How high up did it go?
these questions linger.
Even today.
That's got to be incredibly frustrating.
For those who were close to Nirmala.
For the public who demanded justice,
Absolutely.
it's like the system failed them at every turn.
It's heartbreaking.
And I think that's what Shrestha wants us to grapple with.
He ends his series not with a tidy resolution,
And then by forcing us
to confront the uncomfortable reality.
that sometimes
There are no easy answers.
and the pursuit of justice,
It's ongoing,
it makes you think about Nirmala's family.
especially her mother.
Of course.
She must have been.
Utterly devastated.
Part 21.
Shrestha includes a really powerful quote from her.
She says, I can't even grieve properly.
Mm-hmm.
I can't find peace because I don't know what truly happened to my daughter.
Yeah, that just breaks your heart.
To have lost her child.
And then to be denied
Even the closure of knowing who was responsible.
of seeing them brought to justice.
Right.
And that, I think, is the most important takeaway.
From Shrestha's investigation.
And our deep dive today,
Beyond the twists and turns.
as a case itself,
Beyond the failings of the investigation.
is the human cost.
Yes.
Nirmala Pant was a daughter,
A friend.
a young girl.
With her whole life ahead of her.
Her story, as Shrestha so powerfully conveys,
Is a reminder that we cannot allow ourselves
they become
to these tragedies.
Right.
We have to keep asking questions.
Keep demanding better.
From our systems.
And keep fighting for justice.
Even when the past
It's impossible
is so important.
to remember that.
Because behind every unsolved case,
Every statistic,
every headline,
there's a human life lost
yes,
and a family shattered.
and that's something
We should never,
ever